There are two traditions on Palm Sunday. One is called the Liturgy of the Palms, which you heard read earlier, and we celebrate it as we do every Palm Sunday with the Children's Palm Parade. They lay before us the palm fronds, which I'm kind of proud of, the fact that I've been faithful all these years to burn those on Fat Tuesday so that we would have ashes for Ash Wednesday every year. So before you see evidence that next year we should have an Ash Wednesday service. There are palm fronds to be burned. There's another tradition on Palm Sunday. It's called the Liturgy of the Passion. And most of the time we don't do much with that here. And so I wanted to give that attention today. It's going to require a lot of reading, and I'll probably break up the reading a little bit along the way to offer you a comment or two, but I don't want it to be real preachy. And I don't want to put you to sleep with the reading, but I believe that this bears hearing on this Palm Sunday. Throughout this Lenten journey that we've been on, we have used words. I believe that the Gospel of John is poetic, whether it's in Greek or in English, that there's this great play on words that happens, and I like pointing it out, and we took a chance to use words through the season of Lent to influence our conversation around table. So we've had fun with the Gospel of John. And next week on Easter, the lectionary returns us to the Gospel of John. But today, for the Liturgy of the Palms and the Liturgy of the Passion in this year, year A of the lectionary, it offers us readings from Matthew. You heard the first one again before the Palm Parade. One of the things I want to point out is that Matthew has, from the beginning of Matthew's Gospel until the end, Matthew has an agenda to fulfill as many of the Old Testament prophecies as can be done in a gospel. So for that reason, when we heard the reading of the Palms earlier, you heard it's that Jesus rode in basically on two animals. He rode on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey, because Matthew took Old Testament prophecies extremely literal and went to a great deal of description to make sure that they had been met. Every jot, every tittle, if I could borrow a couple of English words from Matthew's Gospel. So, what I want you to listen for in this reading today is how many Old Testament words you hear. Because when you do, you're hearing Matthew offer the fulfillment of prophecy in the Passion of Jesus. And by the Passion, we mean what Mel Gibson meant in the movie, Jesus' act of sacrificial death. And so, I want you to notice what Matthew includes, and also I may point out along the way what is not there, because there are parts of the story that we are already familiar with, and we're going to find that they're not given to us through Matthew's Gospel, at least some of the things that come to mind. For one example, there's never any mention of who killed Jesus. Matthew is not concerned with whether this was the Jews or whether it was the Romans or whether it was God or you or I. Matthew simply looks for witnesses that can tell you, I was there, this is what happened. So here now, from Matthew 26, beginning with verse 14, the word of the Lord. Then one of the 12 disciples, who was called Judas Iscariot, y'all remember Judas, right? Judas went to the chief priests and said, what will you give me if I betray Jesus to you? And they paid Judas 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he began to look for an opportunity to betray Jesus. This little section right here is like the beginning of a Columbo episode. Did you ever watch Columbo on the Weekly Mysteries? Columbo, starring Peter Falk, was the only one of those that told you at the beginning who did it, and you knew about it through the entire episode. So we know now that Judas has visited the chief priests and plans to betray Jesus. But on the first day of unleavened bread, in other words, on Thursday, the disciples came to Jesus and they said, "Where do you want us to make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" And Jesus said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is near, and I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover meal. And when it was evening, he took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me. You know who it is." But they said, they were greatly distressed and said to him one after another, "Surely not I, Lord." And he answered and said, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him. But woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for him that that one would not have been born." And Judas, who betrayed him, said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." And Jesus replied, "You have said so." You'll recognize this next part of the reading as what we in the Disciples Church call the words of institution, and you hear some form of these every week at the table. But here in this celebration, while they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after he blessed it and he broke it, he gave it to the disciples, and he said, "Take and eat, this is my body." And then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." And when they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. There at the Mount of Olives, Jesus said to them, "You will all become deserters because of me this night." Isn't that a strange way of saying it? Because of me. Because God is near you, you will become deserters this night. Because it is written, and here Matthew does his work, "I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I'm raised up, I will go ahead of you to Galilee." And Peter said to him, remember, Peter sort of represents us, "Though all become deserters because of you, I will never desert you." And Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, Peter, this very night you will have 3 opportunities and will indeed deny me before the cock crows in the morning." And Peter said, "No, even though I would die with you, I will not deny you." And so said all of the disciples. Here's another scene where Jesus seems to pick out the 3 guys that follow him everywhere: Peter, James, and John, the great fishermen in the group, probably Peter and James maybe being the oldest members of the group. Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to the disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And he took with him Peter, James, and John, and he began to be grieved and agitated. And then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and just stay awake with me." And going a little further, he threw himself on the ground and he prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." And then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So, remember Peter, the one that said, 'I'll die before I betray you'? So, could you not stay awake with me just 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, he went away for the second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, then your will be done." And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, and saying the same words. And he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See that my betrayer is at hand." You notice what's not here? We're used to Jesus sweating great drops of blood. And it's biblical. It's in one of the Gospels, but we do not find that account in Matthew's Gospel. While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. And with him was a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. And now the betrayer had given them a sign saying this, "The one I will kiss is the man, arrest him." And at once he came up to Jesus and he said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and he kissed him. And Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." And then they came and they laid their hands on Jesus and they arrested him. And suddenly one of those with Jesus put his hand on his sword and he drew it and he struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. And then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back in its place. For all who take up the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen in this way?" Matthew is doing his work. At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out here with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." And then all the disciples deserted him and fled. You know how many Messianic uprisings ended in a lonely, deserted place? And they ended the same way when the soldiers approached and the Messiah figure shouted to all of his followers and disciples, "To arms, men, to arms." And there they shed all of their blood in the sand. More than once, more than twice, more than 3 times. And yet something different happens in Gethsemane. Jesus does not order his men to arms, but explains to them that if we draw the sword to solve our problems here, like others before us, we will die by the sword. Does anyone besides me find it odd that at this point in their ministry, the followers of Jesus are still carrying weapons? Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, in whose house the scribes and the elders had gathered. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this whole thing would turn out. And now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus so that they might put him to death. But they found none. Though many false witnesses came forward, at last 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days." And the high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer?" Jesus was silent. "What is it that they testify against you?" Jesus was silent. And then the high priest said to him, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the Son of the Father." And Jesus said to him, You have said so. But I tell you that from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." And then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" And they all answered, "He deserves death." And then they spat in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah, who is it that struck you?" But now Peter, remember Peter? He's us. He's the one who followed at a distance and observed from somewhere outside the courtyard. Peter is the witness, the one who says, "I saw this." Peter was sitting outside the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him and said, You also were with Jesus the Galilean." And Peter denied it before all of them, saying, "I do not know what you're talking about." And when he went out to the porch, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "This man here was with Jesus of Nazareth." And again he denied it with an oath, "I swear I do not know the man." And after a little while the bystanders pressed in on Peter and said to him, "Certainly you also are one of them, for your very accent betrays you, you Galilean." And Peter began to curse and swore yet another oath and said, "I do not know this man." And at that moment the cock crowed. And then Peter remembered what Jesus had said, "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and he wept bitterly. I remember when a friend of mine went on his mail rights a passage, and he came back and he said, "I cried all week." And I said, "That's not unusual for you. You're a crier." And he said, "Yes, but for the first time in my life, I cried for someone besides myself." And here we find Peter. Remember Peter? He's the witness, the one who represents us. And here he weeps bitterly, not for his Lord and Savior who has been arrested, but for himself for having denied him. And on Friday morning, when morning came, all the chief priests and elders of the people conferred together against Jesus. In order to bring about his death, they bound him, they led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor. And when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, and he said, "I have missed the mark by betraying this innocent man. His blood is on my hands." And they said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." And throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed. He went out, and out of self-pity, he hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, "It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since they are blood money." After conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. Yet another prophecy fulfilled. And for this reason, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. And then was fulfilled what had been spoken through Jeremiah. And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one on whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord commanded me. You notice what's not happened yet? In Jesus Christ Superstar, Judas sees Jesus beaten half to death and hangs himself in remorse. But in Matthew's account, so far Jesus has been slapped and spat upon, but no scourging yet. But here he's handed from the hands of the church into the hands of the state. Jesus stood now before the governor. The governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "Well, you say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he didn't answer. And then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave no answer. not even to a single charge, so that the governor was amazed. And now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone who they wanted. And at that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Jesus Barabbas was his name. Yeshua, the one who saves, and Barabbas, the Son of the Father. And so after they gathered, Pilate said to them, "Who do you want me to release to you? Jesus, the Son of the Father, Barabbas, or Jesus of Nazareth, who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. And while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife had sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." And now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. And the governor again said to them, "Which of these two do you want me to release to you?" And they said, "Barabbas, the Son of the Father." And Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called Messiah?" And all of them said, "Let him be crucified." And then they asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning. And so he took some water and he washed his own hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And then the people as a whole answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." And so he released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. So the flogging begins. The soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. And they stripped him, and they put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand, and they knelt before him in mockery, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." And they spat on him more, and they took the reed from him and struck him on his head. And after mocking him all the more, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. And then they led him away to crucify him. But as they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. And they compelled this man to carry the cross of Jesus. When they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, they offered him wine to drink, mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided all of his clothes among themselves by casting lots. And when they sat down there and kept watch over him, over his head, they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." More prophecy from Psalm 22, which is actually the reading on Good Friday. And then the two bandits were crucified there with him, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of the Father, come down from the cross." And in the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God, let God deliver him now, if he wants to. For he said, 'I am the Son of the Father.'" And the bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. See what else is missing? No thief in paradise in Matthew's gospel. And then Jesus recites the opening lines from Psalm 22. "From now on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, 'Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani.' That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And when some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once one of them ran and got a sponge and filled it with sour wine and put it on a stick and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come and save him." And then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split and the tombs also were opened. And mystery of all mysteries, many bodies of saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And after the resurrection of Jesus, these saints came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. And now when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified, and they said, "Truly, this man was God's Son." Many women were also there, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee and had provided for him. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. I want to stop right here so you can reflect, and we're going to do that in song for just a moment.